A very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers and listeners. Likewise, if you're joining via Second Advent Radio, we welcome you. If you are on one of our streaming platforms, YouTube at SLC Adventist or SLC Church Channel, or if you're on Facebook, we welcome you just the same. This is another edition of Let's Talk. We're delighted to be with you, and we trust that as we discuss today, that you will find the information meaningful. We are today continuing our discussion we had, I believe it was August 28th. You may recall that we had a discussion on intimate partner violence, and we ran completely out of time. We are back here today, and our two guests with us, Pastor Kay White, who is our Women's Ministries Director for the South Leeward Conference. Pastor White, good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk again.
Good afternoon, Dr. Greene. It's a privilege to be back on Let's Talk.
And with Pastor White, we have Miss Alana Rivas out of Trinidad and Tobago. Attorney, good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk.
Good afternoon, Dr. Greene. Thank you again for the invite to be a part of Let's.
So we had a very interesting discussion last time. We had lots of unanswered questions. Well, not unanswered in the sense that we were not able to answer them, but that we didn't have the time to answer them. And we're hoping that we can revisit some of those. But there is so much to cover. We have been discussing the subject of intimate partner violence. And it's interesting that the whole matter of intimate partner violence has generated so much interest because we just see it around us in the news, in the headlines. There is so much that is going on, and we want to pick it up this afternoon. But before we do that, we would like to invite all of our listeners and viewers to bow with us as we have a word of prayer, shall we? Eternal Father and our God, we thank you for this another opportunity to share with our friends in Radio Land, for those who are listening on Second Advent Radio and those who are joining on our social media platforms. We pray for your guidance. Grant that receptivity will be clear, that we won't have any challenges and any unnecessary delays. Just take full control and grant us your peace and your presence in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So again, welcome. I want to just say that, of course, last time we were here, we addressed the overall broad areas of intimate partner violence. Today, I want us to look at some specifics. The reality is some marriages and relationships do not go well. That is clearly so when we look at the world's divorce rate. It is not an easy thing to own up to the reality that your marriage is failing. Before we deal with marriage, though, let us begin with courtship. Sometimes, if we take action at the appropriate place, we would avoid a lot of hurt. So my first question this afternoon: what should a couple do if one of the partners realizes that the other has a tendency towards violence, control, or anger? We're talking about a couple that is courting, not a couple that is married, but that is courting. So you're now recognizing that your partner has these tendencies, serious tendencies. What course of action should we take in a situation like this?
So my advice is to run. Don't walk, don't jog, but run as fast as you can away from that relationship. When we see these things, these are the red flags that we need to pay attention to. And sometimes we think, like I was saying, I think I mentioned that some of these things may be cute. We think that the person is caring, but these are signs of more to come, signs of the person's character. So we have to, in relationships, pay attention to the red flag, that's here for us. I do remember, hearing a person say that the abuse in relationship is progressive. It starts off with a word, then it goes to physical violence. Wow. It progresses as the abuser gets comfortable with you and starts to feel as though they are more in control of the relationship. So when we start to see these things, leaving that relationship is always the best option.
And I want to add here, that abuse, or in this case, the anger and the violence, which will become evident, is definitely a red flag. It's important, first of all, for you to confront the issue. So if you're dating a young man who is abusive, or is demonstrating anger, or a young woman, first of all, confront the issue. Speak to the individual. Let them know, I'm noticing, you get angry. Confront it. Bring it to the person's attention. I would also say, apart from just confronting it, but to investigate also, especially if you're in an intimate relationship, investigate. What is the issue? Are there family issues and challenges, childhood trauma, childhood abuse, which may lend to that type of behavior? And as attorney says, it's a red flag. You may have to run from that relationship, but investigate, find out what is happening with the person, and definitely you'd want to consider professional help. That individual needs to see someone, and especially if the relationship will not end for whatever reason, you decide to continue the relationship, you may need to ensure that this individual gets professional individual counseling. But it's a serious red flag, and that individual has to make up his or her mind if that person will end up into that relationship, or allow that relationship to get to marriage, because it's very dangerous to get to marriage in that kind of relationship.
Now, of course, we are talking about intimate partner violence here, and the point we're emphasizing is the danger that such behavior poses to relationships. We do understand, I see so many couples all the time in premarital counseling and even in marriage counseling. There are individuals who you wonder sometimes, how did they get married? How did they not see these things? But there are some issues, and while we're talking about intimate partner violence, I always, every opportunity I get, I try to say things like I'm going to say now. Some individuals, unfortunately, feel trapped in a relationship. There may be a young lady who had made a pledge that she was only going to have one man in her life, and so she slept with this man, and she feels because she has had sexual relations with him that she can't move away. It is so I want to talk to those individuals out there who may be listening, who are not yet in a relationship. It is important for you to follow the biblical counsel, because when you go outside of that, you do things that kind of bind you to the relationship. But now, on the other hand, even if that were your experience and you are seeing that there is danger ahead, you've got to swallow your pride. You've got to say, listen, it's better I escape now than I'm stuck with this forever. There are times when I think, Pastor White, you mentioned, help is needed. People may need professional counseling. And if you think you truly love the person, but they are not willing to get the help, then you've got to say, I'm sorry, I can't be in this kind of relationship. Because what you said, attorney, about the progressive nature of violent reaction. Sometimes, a student may go to a class with a new teacher, and the student may say, well, let me try to see how this teacher is, give a little trouble here and there to test the teacher. And when they realize that the teacher is not very strong, then they go deeper and deeper in. So a man may try something on a woman, or a woman on a man, and may realize, oh, they didn't react the way that I thought they would. So that's license for me to do it again.
Right. And Dr. Greene, I want to add here, if you're dating and the person is shouting at you, there's always this anger. The person is throwing something at you. As attorney said, it will only get worse, because this is the best time in your relationship. You're courting, and if you're dating, you're courting, you're getting ready for marriage, and the person, will slap you or hit you or push you. When you get into the relationship, it will be more than a slap. It will be more than a push, and it will be more than something being thrown at you. So definitely, those are red flags.
Correct. And this is the reason why we need to move away and dispel immediately that a person, if they show you who they are prior to marriage, you can bet your dollar that is either going to worsen or they're going to continue being who they have shown you they are after marriage. This idea of once we get married to the person, we can change the person is only a myth. We do not have the power to change people. And we need to reach to that point where we can say, okay, even if, as Pastor White said, I speak to you and I tell you, you've did this and I don't like it. And I think we need to either get some counseling or we need to look at what is causing you to behave like this. And the person, that's just who I am. I am impulsive like that. If you don't like it, then that's your business. I'm not changing for no one. That automatically sends you a message as to how the person is thinking. That isn't a relationship to be in, and to move forward thinking that, okay, if you stay a little longer, show them a little more love, you know, they will start to see and change. That's just a myth and an ideology that will lead or that will or can lead to the death of a person.
All right, so I think we have made that point very clear. There are some individuals who believe that, well, if I step away from this relationship, I may not get another chance. You know, there's a term we use, at least we used to use in Antigua. I don't know if I'm current with the terms now, but we used to say you're getting off the calendar. So a lady is getting too old and she thinks, you know, this is my chance. I've had several relationships before and they didn't work out, so let me try to stick with this one. What we are saying is that you ought to give attention to your mental health. You know,
Yes.
Do not allow yourself to be treated less than you are worthy. Don't think that after marriage, things are going to change. What you see before marriage is going to be just a consolidation of what will happen afterwards. So just take that for what it's worth. Now, so before marriage, then one should most likely pull the plug, or at least satisfy him or herself that help is obtained if they're seeing dangers, and that reformation has taken place. Now, some persons are, however, able to hide their true behavior, and so only in marriage does the violent behavior manifest itself. My experience has been that the average church member is reluctant for persons to seek legal intervention. I did say earlier that we want to deal with some very specific, tough, hard issues. So let's consider the following here. I'm sharing some statistics now, and you know, this is interesting. A total of 87,000 women were intentionally killed in 2017, right? This is some very painful but interesting statistics. 87,000 women were intentionally killed in 2017. More than half of them, that's 58%, 50,000 were killed by intimate partners or other family members, meaning that 137 women across the world are killed by a member of their own family every day. More than a third, 30,000 women, of the women intentionally killed in 2017 were killed by their current or former intimate partner. That is something for us to sit up and pay attention to. You know, now, based on the data that we're seeing here, it's alarming, and we're told that things seem to be getting worse, because when they compare it to the years before, it is increasing. So the annual number of female deaths worldwide resulting from intimate partner violence or family-related homicide seems to be on the increase. Now, as a family life educator, I do believe that constant efforts must be made to strengthen the effective quality of marriages. At the same time, why is it not a good idea for the church? Remember what I said earlier, that church members have a reluctance in people getting legal help when there is violence involved. So why might not it be a good idea for the church to discourage persons from seeking legal intervention in matters of violence?
I would begin by stating, first of all, that intimate partner violence, it's a crime. it's an illegal act. And so it should be considered in those cases that it should be not just considered, but it should be reported to the authorities. So for the church to in any way attempt to hinder the reporting of intimate partner violence or any form of abuse against women, it is not right legally. And the church and the leaders of the church can be prosecuted for keeping that kind of information. I want to also emphasize here that even when we consider the biblical and the theological ramifications of not addressing issues like this in the church, it is significant. There are persons in the church who believe that matters should be resolved on the inside. They use the writings of the Apostle Paul, and they say the brother should not take the sister to court, and this one should not take this one to court. But if this is a criminal act, it cannot be resolved in the local church context. So that biblical example is not relevant. Then you have the whole aspect of someone saying that the wife should submit to her husband, so the husband hit the wife, and this is a family matter. The church should not get involved in that. That is not theologically sound. And even as women or a woman who is in that kind of situation, she may feel, I have to be submissive to my husband, he's beating me, and so maybe I am the one who is, not doing what I'm supposed to do as a wife. So the church has responsibility, not only legally, but even to set the theological and the biblical understanding to the church that this is not a matter that can be resolved, and the Bible does not in any way support that kind of behavior. And finally, I would say safety. The safety of the member is critical, and as a church, we cannot sit comfortably and sleep comfortably in our beds as leaders, knowing that we have women and men in homes and they're not safe.
Correct. And I just want to add to Pastor White by saying we have to look at what is the value here. The value is life. Life is worth more than an image. And we know, we preach God is love all the time. And if God is love, he will never sanction abuse. So as a church, we need to inform our members that if any male or female experiences abuse, they have that right to seek protection and safety. Even if that protection and safety is within the remit of the law, they have that right. And we as a church supposed to support them and provide them with the information and the assistance that they need in order to find that place of comfort.
Now, last time we were here, August 28th, I did make the point that this church belongs to God. We don't need to think that we have to try to help out God in protecting the church. There are lots of people who say, well, we have to safeguard the image of the church. And a lot of times what they do is to create more damage, more harm than good. Now, somebody did ask a question last time, and I'm just going to pull that up quickly. Interesting question. Who should a spouse in the SDA church report abuse to? Now, attorney, let me ask you this question. You're an attorney. If the pastor, what happens if action is not taken by the church? Should legal action then be taken?
I would say whether or not the church takes action should be invoked, depending on the situation. In a situation like this, there's so many things, so many options that the person can explore. So they can look at obtaining, and I can speak for what happens in Trinidad and Tobago. They can look at one, obtaining a protection under the Domestic Violence Act, or two, they can petition the court to dissolve the marriage or for legal separation. So even if the church decides not to take any steps, they now have to do what is needed for their own protection and safety, even if it means seeking that refuge within the law.
I want to say that marriages are dynamic, relationships are dynamic. If you are married, I mean, we're talking about, we did say earlier, and deliberately so, if you see signs before marriage that individuals are exhibiting violent behavior, then please interpret the signs and take the necessary action. Call off the relationship. Don't go into a marriage that you're not comfortable with. But if you're already married and you begin to see these signs, then seek help early. It may be that you went to a function and the gentleman or the lady loses his or her temper and did something inappropriate. At that first onset, you need to, that is clearly somebody stepping over their boundary. I was, Dr. Bratton and I on Marriage Encounter, we are currently discussing boundaries. And when a person steps out of his or her lane, they should be warned and try to get help for the individual. If you realize that things are getting progressively worse, then you need to take action to protect yourself, because you never know when it's going to be too late. And I would like to say, as strongly as I can, relationships are not meant to be centers of violence. You know, a marriage relationship is supposed to be a relationship of harmony and peace and love. And when it is not that, then we are displeasing God. And the church is not going to sanction that kind of behavior. It is important to know that, irrespective of who has told you what. I have had situations where I remember, you know, an individual decides, I can't take this anymore, I'm going to get help. And there was so much pressure from the person's family, you know, how are you going to make the church look bad, etc. Yes. We need to rise above these kinds of stereotypes and realize that we're talking about a life and death situation.
And I want to add here to the question that, you know, once there's a domestic abuse situation or intimate partner abuse, the victim, as we're saying, has the right to report the matter to the police. You just inform the pastor. You don't have to get the pastor's permission or the church permission. You inform the pastor, this is my situation, and I've reported the matter. So to report the matter to the church and hope the church may act, it is not the proper protocol and steps. You want to report the matter to the police, you inform the pastor within the local context. The church will begin to do its own investigation. Once the individual is under investigation by the law, in most cases, the pastor and the church may indicate to the abuser, you can recuse yourself because there's an investigation happening against you. And once there is prosecution or the person ends up being charged by the legal system, then the church will continue its process by taking some form of discipline. So it's a courtesy. Just inform the church so the church can do what it has to do, but the reporting should be done to the authorities.
Now there's a question that just came in, but there's a similar question that was asked last time. We didn't get to it, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask it now. If my husband, this is the one from the previous broadcast, if my husband is abusing me and I report it to the church, but my husband is still leading out every Sabbath, what should I do if the church is not doing anything? And then the question that was just asked a few minutes ago, what is the church doing about a husband and wife who abuse each other, still serve in the church and is known by others? Very interesting questions here. Now, well, let you respond first.
Go ahead, attorney.
Oh no, I was giving you this one, Pastor White.
All right. So as we've been highlighting, we always want to encourage the victim to report the matter to the police. You inform the pastor, you inform the church, and as a church, we should have an attitude. And I think attorney mentioned that earlier, that we should have an attitude where we respond to individuals who are saying, look, this is my predicament, this is my situation. The church should not hide anything. Dr. Greene, you highlighted that this is God's church. So there's no need for us to think that we have to cover up anything. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church in no way endorses covering up or hiding anything. So if you have reported this to the church and there's no response, there is a challenge in the context of your local church, which then I would then say, report the matter to the police and do what you have to do legally. But once the church has a knowledge of the situation, generally, there's a response where the pastor, the leaders will speak to the parties involved, and the church will take action when investigation takes place from the legal standpoint and from the local church context. So it's unfortunate to even hear that there's knowledge that a spouse is abusive and they officiated in the context of the church. That is not how the church functions normally.
I want to kind of divide this scenario in two. On the one hand, we have abuse, an abusive relationship. Okay. On the other hand, we have a situation where these individuals have now become a bad witness. So now with the abuse, right, one has to ensure, again, I want to talk about the importance of giving attention to mental health issues, and where there is abuse, whether it be verbal, emotional, physical, abuse is abuse, and one needs to get help where that is concerned. On the other hand, when it is known that there are individuals who are not living according to the principles of the Bible, then those individuals should not be leading out in the church. And if that is not addressed, then we have an issue there. It means that the leadership of the church has failed in this regard. And I wanted to make that point, and I hope that is clear. We should not have a situation where there are individuals who are not maintaining the biblical principles in their own lives and are leading out in God's church. That is not how the church is designed to function.
Dr. Greene, I just want to add there, because I've seen it happen in with my experience in church life, so forth. The thing about this kind of situation, people start to take sides. When persons take sides, we find the divide happening within the church, and you do find one party feeling ostracized as a result of it. So we now have to ask the church to hear both sides, to give the same care and attention and grace to both parties. Because we can lose a soul as a church if we just decide to take one over the other. And I've seen it happen with persons I've known personally, where they would have made their report to the church indicating that this is the situation that they're experiencing. And the church ostracized them for making that report against a person who was well loved within the church. So the person continued functioning, and having been ostracized, the person who reported left the church. So we lost a soul. We've left a bitter taste in someone's mouth as to how we as a church deal with this kind of situation. This calls, as you're saying, for the church leadership to take stock of the situation, because if we are condoning this kind of behavior, we send a message that is against God's message. So we as a church need to stop taking sides and to apply that same love and grace to everyone. And if we are not in a position to do so, we are supposed to refer the parties to the right, whether it is a counselor, therapist, or let them know the legal options, give them the information so that they can get the help that's needed.
Well, certainly. But a couple of things I want to say in response to that. One is, you know, when we say that, when people say that they report a matter to the church, I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that. Now, a person may talk to an elder, may talk to a friend, etc. But our expectation is that every church has a professional pastor who is there. I'm not going to say that the pastor always deals with things professionally, but at least we know that we have individuals who are well trained to be able to assess these cases and to recognize that every member of the church is important in God's sight, even the individual who is deliberately doing wrong. So we ought to reach and treat each other as individuals in need of God's favor and God's grace. Our pastors are trained to understand the dynamics in these kinds of situations, but also trained to know that when this is too big for me, I can refer to somebody else, so that the referral system should be in place. It is unfortunate, and like you, attorney, I have heard of situations where, you know, some, especially when we deal with a case, let's say, for example, a divorce situation, that's another topic. But sometimes church members themselves don't know how to relate to individuals who are hurting. And rather than giving the support and the nurturing and encouragement that is necessary in a time when there is a significant family crisis, people tend to shy away. Sometimes people shy away because, you know, you may have a married couple who may think, well, I wonder if my marriage is going to go like that. You know, so there are various dynamics at play here. But again, at the end of the day, remember, the church is a hospital for sinners. And yes. the leaders of the church are supposed to be individuals who are concerned about healing, concerned about relationship building. Well, let's move on. It's interesting, and it's going to get even more interesting. So let's look. Hold a second there for me. I just asked that question a few minutes ago about the whole matter of violence, and when this individual is clearly demonstrating that degree of violence, whether or not we should seek legal options. So what are some legal options? Now, let's say we have a situation where the relationship, the marriage has become really, really violent. What are legal options? Attorney, you mentioned a few. You said in Trinidad, I think you mentioned restraining orders, family mediation, legal separation, and of course we can go on to divorce. But can you just elaborate and say what is the difference between these?
Okay, so with the protection order, it's an application you make within the magistrate level, asking the court to restrain the actions of a person. So the person could be restrained from speaking violently against you, from harassing you, from hitting you, from even coming within close contact with you. Because of course, now we have to cater for cyberbullying, cyber stalking, all these things. So what the protection order does is now put in place measures that the person cannot do. So it gives you that level of protection that with this piece of paper, once the person breaches it, they can now be sentenced to prison or fined accordingly. So that is where the Domestic Violence Act in terms of the protection of the persons. And of course, for us, the Protection Order Act is limited more to families, if you're married and so forth like that. With regards to the family aspect of it, you could now petition the courts for this dissolution of your marriage, to dissolve the marriage. So that would now give you clean break, allow you to go your separate ways without being tied to this person any longer. Or you can apply for legal separation, because some persons really do not want to dissolve the marriage. They just want to have a document saying that they're legally separated from the person. So
can I interrupt you a little bit?
Yes.
Of course, I know you're speaking in the Trinidad context.
Yes.
So you're using a term there that I want clarification on. Now you said the dissolution of the marriage. Are you meaning by that divorce?
Correct, divorce.
Okay, all right. Yes. Just wanted to get that clear.
Yes, so you can divorce the person, or you can become legally separated. So legally separated means that you are still married, just that you no longer live together. And you can do that under the facts of unreasonable behavior. So this is where you can now tell the court that this person has behaved in a way that you cannot reasonably be expected to continue living with the person. So with that, you could now get that separation that you need from the abuser. We also have the option where you can seek a counselor, a therapist, within that family mediation setting to help you as you work through the trauma and you try to cope with the situation, or you try to bring some resolution as to what may be causing the person to act this way. So that is an option that's also available if it is, of course, both parties are willing, because family mediation only works where both parties are involved and interested in attending. It's a voluntary base. So it's not that I want to go and the other person doesn't. You can't force a person to attend counseling if they don't want to.
I want to add here, Dr. Greene, and agree with attorney that in the context of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, once an individual is experiencing that form of abuse, reporting to the police, critical, as she mentioned, the restraining order, protective order, critical, separation is also an option. In the context of divorce, it has its own theological and biblical ramifications, because as a church, domestic abuse or intimate partner abuse is not a grounds biblically for divorce, but at the same time, though it's not a ground, one of the grounds for divorce in the context of the Bible, we've been talking about safety, we've been talking about mental wellness, we've been talking about allowing individuals to live in an environment where they are safe. And because of that, as a church, we definitely endorse, and I think Dr. Greene highlighted that earlier, that if you're in this situation, pack your things and get out, run for your life. But in the context of the Adventist Church, divorce is not an option. I will let Dr. Greene continue down that
Which
road.
is why, though, if I may, I said I included Pastor White and Dr. Greene, the legal separation. Because legal separation really is not a divorce. It means that your marriage still exists. You are just separated from this person. So you're still married, but living apart. So I'm hoping that is something that the church itself will consider, because it is an option available if we are looking at the safety and protection of an individual.
Well, let me speak to this for just a minute, because I know that our listeners are very interested in this kind of discussion.
Yes.
So the church recognizes that we live in a world of sin. And as much as we would want to have perfect marriages, we don't. And there are times when, unfortunately, marriages deteriorate to the point where it becomes difficult or unsafe for the parties to continue in that relationship. In some countries, there is the option of legal separation. In other countries, the only way to get that is through a divorce. The issue, and the church is not going to take disciplinary action if a person divorces, if a married couple divorces. The issue that couples need to take into consideration, if we're talking about violence, we're not talking here about marital unfaithfulness in the sense of sexual irregularities. But so couples need to understand that if these are their circumstances and there is, whether it be legal separation or a divorce, that then they biblically cannot remarry. So fine, you can't live with this person any longer, but biblically you can't remarry, unless, of course, the other person dies or in the meantime becomes unfaithful. Yeah. So that's important. But of course, God is concerned about your health and your well-being. And if that's what it takes for you to live in peace and safety, then by all means. And so the church is going to, and you made a point earlier, Attorney, that again, as a church, we have to be loving. We have to be loving to both parties. We can reach out to both persons. We can work with them and try to encourage them. And if there's a legal separation, so be it. If there's a restraining order, yeah, then we ought to be able to respect that and see that these individuals need the support and help. And I want to make an appeal to those who are listening. The next time you hear of a divorce situation, do not take sides. Do not shun the individuals and make them think it's the worst thing that has ever happened. It's traumatic to get there, but you don't know the circumstances. Relationships are very dynamic, and you would do yourself a favor and do them a favor by not coming to conclusions about these kinds of intimate relationships. All right. So I hope we have clarified that. I expect a question or two that will come in on that. But for the time being, let's try to move on.
Right. So Dr. Greene, I just want to add that, within Trinidad and Tobago, for anyone who may be experiencing domestic violence or intimate partner violence, we have the gender-based units attached to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that they can call, and they can get that, they can report the abuse, and they can get that help that they need to have that matter addressed. So if you know anyone within Trinidad and Tobago, please feel free to contact the gender-based violence unit.
And in Antigua, we also have Pastor White, I know your Women's Ministries Director. We also have Directorate of Gender Affairs.
Definitely, yes.
That people can get help. There is also a family court system that was recently established in Antigua. I was talking to an attorney, in fact, I believe just this week or last week, and the interesting thing is that he was sharing with me that, you know, if there is a petition for divorce, the courts these days would tend to recommend mediation before a final verdict in terms of a divorce. So there are all these kinds of intervention to help the couple to get counseling, to come around. Of course, I suppose it cannot be forced, but you know, the occasions when the court would call and say, listen, we have a couple, can you provide counseling for them, that kind of thing. And so there are structures in place to give you help. So don't just sit there and think, oh, my world is falling apart and there's nothing I can do but just live in this situation. Now it's interesting because here's another question that has come in. What rights does either spouse have in case of a legal separation? So let's say they don't want a divorce, they're going to go the route of legal separation. What rights do they have? Now, I mean, we're talking about technical things. I'm glad we have your attorney because you are now have to tell us. We got married, we built a house together, etc. We have children together, and my partner is behaving really, really violent. I have to move out, and I need a legal separation because I'm afraid that, you know, so. So how does that work? What rights do we have?
Well, similar to the process to petition for divorce, the same procedure is followed. So if as a couple, you've acquired assets together, you can always make an application for financial relief and ask the court to deal with that property settlement and now determine whether you all are going to share it equally or whether one is going to get a greater percentage over the other. The court can, if there are children in front of the marriage, the court could now make an order relative to custody, to maintenance, to extracurricular activities. The court has the power to set the boundaries that will now define the relationship moving forward.
Okay, so lots of legal ramifications.
Yes.
Yeah, we want to say, I would like to say, of course, you know, many of our listeners would hear me on the radio on Marriage Encounter on a number of occasions, and we always say that our initial approach is towards reconciliation. What we want to see, and not just people staying or living together, but we want to see healthy, meaningful relationships. I do not personally believe that a marriage where there is stress, where there is heartache and frustration and abuse is God's ideal. That's not God's design. No. And that's not what we are about. What God wants is to have a relationship in marriage where there is freedom, where there is mutual respect, where there is joy and lots of love. And that's what we strive to aspire to, which is where our family life department and the counseling that we offer, that's what it's geared to do. Of course, we don't live in a perfect world, and sometimes even our best intentions don't work out well. And even when we sometimes try to intervene and provide counseling, that may not work out. And individuals may end up going legal separation or divorce, as the case may be. We still love them, but we live in an imperfect world.
And Dr. Greene, we are concerned about the mental wellness of victims and of members. And so whether it be the restraining order, legal separation, whatever you decide to do, that's going to allow you to have better night's rest. You will sleep better. You will sleep better knowing that you do not have to wonder if you're going to get a slap in your face any moment, if you're going to have some form of physical abuse. And not only that, but physically, you'll have your physical wellness in addition to just the mental and the physical. Escaping from this relationship and allowing the courts to handle this matter with separation can also break a cycle. That's right. A cycle of abuse in that family, that this could be a new page in your family, a new experience for you as a victim, that you have now taken the power back. You've taken your life back. It's a new start. And even for the children, and we didn't touch, I know we're getting into children this afternoon, but even as we consider children, this is the moment to give your children an opportunity to get out of that situation. So escaping sometimes is not just for you as the victim. If there are children involved, you are going to save your child or children trauma, scars, and problems that they did not need to be exposed to in the first place. So whether it be restraining order, separation, break free from that cycle of abuse. And there's a call today for some women. And as Dr. Greene highlighted, that the Directorate of Gender Affairs in Antigua, the Women's Ministries Department, we are here to guide you, and will always say to you, your safety is important, the safety of your children important, and your mental health. Definitely.
Let me throw in men's ministry for the men as well. You know,
yes.
Some man may be saying, what about us?
Sure, doctor. You know? Yes, you can put in the men's.
Yes. Now, for you know, I imagine that somebody's listening and they may be saying, well, I can't believe these pastors are saying this. You know, let's just set the record straight. I want to re-emphasize. God's design for marriage is happiness, meaningfulness, fulfillment. Unfortunately, some of us are selfish. Some of us don't care. Some of us don't follow the biblical blueprint, and marriages break down. We know that sometimes, and I did share some statistics. You know, we spoke about thousands of women dying every year from domestic violence. That is not God's design. No. And what we are saying is that we are not in support of a woman or a man living in a relationship where there is constant physical abuse, beating up on one another. And ultimately, in fact, I have here a question I wanted to ask, just to revisit the children again, because Pastor White, I think you mentioned just now, some of our children get scarred for life. So if we may just revisit this matter of children again. We touched on it last time, but here is a quote from the 1999 book. Last time I mentioned that in 1999, the General Conference put out a book called Understanding Intimate Violence. And I want to read a quotation from this book. It said, of those children who see their mother abused, approximately 40% suffer anxiety, 48% are severely depressed, and 75% of children over the age of 15 run away from home. Children who witness violence or those who are victims of abuse may display symptoms such as sleep disturbances, hallucinations, bedwetting, flashbacks, sudden startling or jumpy behaviors, or decreased interest in the future, which may include suicide attempts. Other behaviors may include increased aggression, poor conflict resolution skills, social withdrawal, positive behaviors, frequent changes in emotional state with no clear cause, helplessness, acting older, eating disorders, hurting themselves, and the use of drugs and alcohol. So this is, we're talking here about really traumatic behaviors. The children, the innocent individuals in all of this are being impacted for life. Maybe you can carry on that because this is serious.
That is true. So just to add to what you're saying, Dr. Greene, a recent US survey would have stated that 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year. They said that 90% of these children witnessed the act of violence itself. So based on that alone, we know that there's no denying that children who are exposed to intimate partner violence, they experience emotional, mental, and social damage that can affect their developmental growth. Children who witness violence between parents are also greater at risk of becoming violent themselves in the future. So when we look at the relationship when we realize that it's getting to that point, we have to consider the risk, not just to ourselves, as Pastor White was saying, but also to our children. We have to consider the effect it has, not solely on us, but also on the children. And then, of course, from there, it will go into society, because it's really a rippling effect when you look at it. It affects on me, it affects on children. The children go out into society, and we determine the kind of societal members they become. So we have to really take stock of that entire situation and do really, it's sometimes a very hard decision to make, but we have to make a call to remove ourselves and the children from that environment. And not just remove, sometimes we have to consider getting that counseling on that therapy that is needed to help the children or help ourselves cope with the situation and transition and learn how to emotionally heal from that traumatic experience. Sometimes moving is not enough. And I know we have this attached to getting counseling or going to therapy, but we have to remove that, because sometimes it's necessary in order for a child to be able to heal from their traumatic experiences.
And sadly, some children end up, blaming themselves.
Yes.
For what's happening in the home. That is my fault. Yes. That the relationship is going bad. It is my fault.
Correct.
And that is a very difficult position for a child to be in. Then we consider anxiety. The children are anxious. And as you said, attorney, they go to school and they become the bully in the class, and they demonstrate that same anger, because that's how I see my mother respond. That's how I see my father respond to issues. And so the violence, the anger, whatever they see in the home, it becomes familiar to them. That is how they respond to crisis and respond to issues, and hence their position to become abusers themselves, because abuse is so familiar. That is all I know. So escaping from those relationships, and she said 1 in 15, you said, attorney, 1 in 15.
1 in 15.
And then we have 1 in 3 women.
That's right.
Who will experience intimate partner abuse. So definitely the children will be involved, as you see the stats are all showing that.
Right.
Well, we have a few questions here. Interesting questions. So let me get to this one here. Can attorney, I believe this one is for you. Can gross financial malpractice in a marriage? Well, I was going to say I believe this is for you, but let me make it a general question. It says, can gross financial malpractice in a marriage be considered abusive and grounds for separation and even divorce? Interesting question.
It is a very interesting question. And yes, financial abuse is a type of abuse that can happen among partners. So if it is that one spouse is taking control over the finances or hugging the money or telling you how to spend and what to do with it, that can be financial abuse. And yes, it can factor in to the unreasonable behavior factor that you can now petition the court to help you get that divorce.
Now, of course, we always want to make clear that you do understand that while you can get a divorce for anything these days, that does not give you the right to remarry. We just want to make that clear. All right.
Yes, that is true.
So here is another question. This is a question from the previous broadcast, and the person says, the mind is such a funny thing. How can you get an abuser to realize what they're doing is wrong, even when they're unable to see it themselves?
Well, we have to understand that, the effects of abuse, trauma, especially those who become abusers because they had trauma from childhood, it's deep-rooted. It's not something that can easily be identified by the abuser. And as we've been highlighting, that abuse becomes a way of life to the abuser. And so the person might physically harm their partner, verbally, financially harm their partner, but may not see it as an issue. In these deep-rooted issues, situations, it will take therapy, it will take professional intervention for the person to even come to the realization that there is a problem. We know that there is always hope. God is always able, But these issues are so deep rooted that the abuser will not, you can't just come to the abuser and say, hey, you have been abusing me, you need to stop, right? You can say that if you want to, but that is not going to change the situation. It will take professional help for that person, one, to come to the realization that they have a problem, and two, to experience any form of transformation. And so this is the world we're living in. Sin is a broken world, and some things are very difficult to even allow a person to realize in their experience.
Correct. And just to add, Dr. Greene, to what Pastor White was saying, back to my earlier example of someone saying, well, this is who I am, this is my nature. We can't open someone's eyes unless they want it to be open. We can say, well, you are doing this and this is wrong. But until they reach to that point where they see for themselves or acknowledge that they are wrong, that their actions are wrong, that there's need for change within them, it is very hard to watch them and say, this, that you need to get help. They have to want that help. They have to seek that help. They must want to change. And not change because if they don't, you will leave, or for some other motivating factor. It must be a real, genuine change that they want themselves because they realize that it is needed. So whether or not you leave, they are at the point that they need help. Up until they come to that realization, it will be very difficult, very, very difficult to guide somebody or to open somebody's eyes that they need that help.
Well, I would like to, maybe we have 2 minutes to answer this final question here. What are the stats for positive results after counseling? I don't know that we have any information to respond to that. We don't collect information on counseling. Counseling is private and confidential. What I would say though is, as somebody who has been very involved in marriage and premarital counseling, is that most times it does make a difference. Unfortunately, we have to have this awareness that we can't help everybody. Sometimes we refer when we realize that it's not working out, but most times, a significant percentage of times, the couples do get help. We also want to say that you don't want to wait until your relationship has deteriorated to the point where you are in trouble to try to think about counseling. The Seventh Adventist Church is a blessed church. We have lots of family seminars. We have a wide range of issues from the family life department. We are always focusing on singles, courtship, building marriage, building relationship, parenting, etc. Avail yourselves of the opportunity to attend these kinds of seminars to get the help you need. Dr. Bratton and myself, we present weekly on Second Advent Radio, Marriage Encounter, a very, very, not because I'm the presenter, but a very insightful series. We are also on SLC Adventist on Sabbath afternoons at 2 p.m. Marriage Encounter is on SLC Adventist at 2 p.m. That's on YouTube at 2 p.m. And we encourage you to utilize the opportunity to sit together as a couple and to participate in these kinds of things, so that you don't just wait until your marriage has fallen off track to try to get help. That is like, like a man not going to get his annual checkup, like a woman not going to get her annual pap smear and mammograms and that kind of stuff, only to discover that it's too late and you're in trouble and you're going to die. So we wanted to say those things. And I want to say that our time is up right now. Attorney Rivas and Pastor White, it was truly a delight to have you both on Let's Talk. I almost said Marriage Encounter.
That's really invite, Dr. Greene.
we are delighted that you were able to avail yourselves of the opportunity, and we are so very grateful for the contribution that you made. I'll give you an opportunity to say one last word, but to our listeners, please remember that next week we continue. Next week, by the way, we're going to be having a two-part series we're beginning. We're going to be talking about evangelism and discipleship. We want to look at the whole matter of, are we doing it right? Are we getting it right? Is our evangelistic strategy best for the church? So that is a very important discussion. You know, there are lots of things we can say about that. But next week we have a special guest who will address those issues with us. So Pastor White, your closing words. Attorney Rivers, your closing words.
Right, I just want to say that, you know, intimate partner abuse, it's a reality. We're in a broken world. But once it comes to your knowledge, I want to encourage you to please express concern, you know, believe the victim, you know, allow them to report the matter to the legal authorities. Be there, supportive, offer counseling as a church. We're there for that. And if you're a victim today, I want to say to you, you know, God expects you not to remain in this situation. You can come out of this situation, break the cycle, think about your future generation, and what can you do today? The decisions you make now can influence your family for the future. Break free, because God is able to set you free.
That's right. So I would just close by saying that abuse is not a relationship problem. It's an individual problem. And we have to realize that. So if you find yourself in a situation, it's time to speak up, speak out. It's time to say something if you see something. And as a church, we need to educate ourselves on the things that we can do to help our members who may be suffering abuse in their household. So let's all be your brother's keeper. Let's say something if we see something, speak up and speak out against intimate partner violence.
Well, thank you so much. God bless you all. Thanks, viewing audience, for your attention, and see you next week at 3 p.m.